This is the story of a ticking clock, a denied signature, and the exact moment Queen Camilla realized her reign comes with a strict, non-negotiable expiration date. In less than 24 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of Camilla's absolute, untouchable authority within the royal family was quietly and ruthlessly dismantled. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that a title is merely a constitutional courtesy. But true institutional power is forged in bloodline, sovereign wealth, and silent administrative control. Over the next few minutes, we are going to unpack the secret. Desperate power grab, she recently attempted to secure the royal billions for her own non-royal children. We will expose how a calculated insult at the Epsom Derby inadvertently activated the freezing wrath of Princess Anne, and how Prince William executed a flawless administrative strike known in whispered palace circles as the June 13th decree. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the devastating realization currently paralyzing the Queen. Despite sitting on the highest throne in the land, she actually owns absolutely nothing. To understand why this specific internal clash has pushed the British monarchy to the brink of a silent civil war, we must step back and recognize the staggering 30-year manipulation that brought Camilla to this point. For 3 decades, she played the longest, most meticulous game of reputational rehabilitation in modern history. She survived the bitter fallout of the 1990s, the tragic shadow of Princess Diana, and the intense hostility of the British public. She orchestrated a slow, methodical integration into the royal fold, surviving on the singular fact that she held the absolute unwavering devotion of the man who would be king. When the crown was finally placed upon her head and the word consort was quietly dropped from her title, she believed she had finally won. She operated under the fundamental belief that she had King Charles completely controlled, and by extension the entire institution of the monarchy. In those heady days following the coronation, Camilla felt entirely untouchable, operating under the illusion of absolute power. She began to push the boundaries of her position, steadily elevating her own non-royal children and grandchildren into the periphery of the crown's glow. She assumed that the title of queen granted her an equal share in the Windsor dynasty, a permanent structural authority that would outlast any crisis, but the fatal flaw in Camilla's architecture of power is that it is entirely dependent on a single man's heartbeat. She built a glittering, sprawling empire on borrowed land, and as the realities of the king's mortality and the shifting tides of public favour began to set in, a deep, quiet panic took hold within her private office. This is where the illusion of absolute power crashes headfirst into commercial desperation. Camilla acts as though she owns the palaces, the historic estates, and the vast wealth of the monarchy. She enjoys the private jets, the curated wardrobes, and the endless stream of servants. But the staggering truth of the British Constitution is that Camilla owns virtually nothing. The true commercial power of the monarchy, the liquid wealth, and the sprawling real estate that funds their private existence belongs entirely to the Duchy of Cornwall. And the Duchy of Cornwall belongs exclusively, legally, and permanently to Prince William. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional funding and no vast ancestral properties of her own to fall back on. If the reign of King Charles were to unexpectedly end, she would instantly become a dowager entirely at the mercy of her stepson's administrative goodwill. Driven by this profound commercial desperation, Camilla attempted a staggering secret maneuver. Behind the scenes, during a period of acute institutional vulnerability, documents began shifting. According to internal palace leaks, Camilla's office attempted to legally entangle her son, Tom Parker Bowles, with the commercial operations of the royal estates. This was not about securing a minor grace and favour cottage. This was a highly sophisticated attempt to establish long-term commercial lease agreements and luxury business ventures for her non-royal bloodline, using the sovereign properties as the foundational capital. Camilla was trying to build a permanent, legally binding financial structure that would guarantee her family's access to royal wealth, effectively blurring the line between the House of Windsor and the Parker Bowles lineage before Prince William ascended to the throne. She assumed she could quietly push these legal structures through the administrative bureaucracy while the king was distracted and the Prince of Wales was focused on his wife's recovery. But Camilla made a fatal, arrogant miscalculation. In her desperate rush to secure her legacy, she allowed her hubris to spill over into the public arena, committing a moral outrage that directly challenged the ultimate guardian of the royal bloodline, Princess Anne. The catalyst for this ultimate reckoning was a seemingly minor scheduling conflict that masked a profound institutional insult. On the upcoming date of June 6th, Princess Anne's son, Peter Phillips, is scheduled to celebrate his wedding. It is a deeply personal, intimate moment for the Blood family. However, this date directly clashes with the Epsom Derby. The Derby is not just a horse race, it is a profound symbol of the late Queen Elizabeth II's enduring legacy, a highly visible public event steeped in sovereign tradition. Camilla, starving for the validation of the late Queen's aura and determined to project an image of supreme, unquestioned authority, made a calculated choice. She maneuvered the royal schedule so that she and King Charles would abandon the family wedding early, leaving Princess Anne's family behind, all to ensure Camilla could stand on the royal balcony at Epsom, bathed in the flashing cameras, wearing the metaphorical mantle of Queen Elizabeth. It was an act of staggering exploitation, a clear signal that Camilla valued her own public relations and the illusion of supremacy over the actual flesh and blood of the Windsor family. She wanted the spotlight of the late Queen, even if it meant stepping on the neck of the late Queen's daughter. That detail matters immensely because it shattered whatever fragile truce remained between Camilla and the Princess Royal. Princess Anne does not care about tabloid headlines, and she does not engage in petty drawing room arguments. Anne possesses the fierce, unyielding institutional memory of the crown, and she fights with forensic, devastating precision. Quietly enraged by the Epsom Derby insult, Anne initiated a silent audit of the royal household's recent administrative activities. She utilized her unparalleled access to the inner workings of the state to trace the flow of paperwork coming out of Camilla's private office. It did not take long for the Princess Royal to uncover the paper trail. She discovered the secret commercial lease agreements, the attempted financial integrations, and the quiet effort to siphon the prestige and property of the crown into the hands of Tom Pocker Bowles. Anne did not confront Camilla. She did not leak the discovery to the press. Instead, she took the documents directly to the one man who actually owns the land, Prince William. When William and Anne sat in the private study at Windsor Castle and reviewed the paperwork, the realization was immediate and chilling. This was not a simple misunderstanding of protocol. This was a parasitic encroachment upon the sovereign rights of the next generation. Camilla was trying to steal from the future to fund her own past. The threat to the ongoing preservation of the true royal bloodline became impossible to ignore. Yet there would be no explosive television interviews and no public shouting matches. The response from the future king and the Princess Royal would be executed with a cold, ruthless legality that used the very weight of the British Constitution as a weapon. William and Anne initiated the drafting of a strict, legally binding institutional ring fence, an administrative barricade that palace insiders have quietly dubbed the June 13th Decree. This internal legal mechanism is designed to permanently and irrevocably block any non-royal individual, specifically targeting the Parker Bowles family from holding commercial leases, securing long-term financial grants, or operating businesses on sovereign or duchy lands. It is a total forensic financial lockout. The decree essentially mandates that the wealth of the crown can only flow to those in the direct line of succession or those officially designated as working royals by the reigning monarch and the heir apparent jointly. The execution of this silent retaliation was breathtaking in its subtlety. Camilla did not receive a threatening letter or a dramatic confrontation. Instead, she simply hit an invisible, impenetrable wall. When her office attempted to finalize the next stage of the commercial paperwork for her son, the digital access logs were denied. The documents were returned with a single, polite administrative note stating that all estate leasing requests must now be co-signed by the Duchy of Cornwall's legal team, which is entirely controlled by Prince William. Her signature, the signature of the Queen, was suddenly deemed legally insufficient for the structural changes she was trying to force. As the reality of the block paperwork set in, Camilla experienced a wave of cold, suffocating panic. She realized that she had been entirely outmaneuvered, stripped of her illusion of absolute control, financially walled off by her stepson, and quietly condemned by her sister-in-law. She knew the trap had snapped shut. The June 13th decree was not just a piece of paper. It was a permanent eviction notice for her legacy. Terrified by the sudden collapse of her secret empire, Camilla retreated to the one remaining card she had left to play. She went directly to King Charles, presenting the blocked documents and demanding that he override William's authority. She demanded that the king use his supreme sovereign power to crush the June 13th decree and protect her family's financial future. The entire balance of the modern monarchy hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the king's study, waiting for him to speak. When Camilla stood in the quiet sanctuary of the king's study, demanding that Charles use the absolute power of the sovereign to crush crush the June 13th decree and protect her son's commercial future, she expected immediate compliance. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had fought his mother, his advisors, the British press, and his own children to force Camilla's acceptance into the royal fold. He had spent decades burning through his own political capital and public goodwill to protect her from the consequences of their history. Camilla fully expected that in this moment of acute administrative humiliation, Charles would summon Prince William and deliver a crushing reprimand. She expected the king to remind his heir that Camilla was the queen and that her family was now an extension of the crown. But she encountered something far more terrifying than anger. She encountered a devastating silence. What appears to be true, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics of the king's household, is that Charles simply refused to intervene. He did not yell. He did not defend his wife. He sat in the suffocating quiet of his office and did absolutely nothing. This was the psychological climax of Camilla's decades-long campaign for power, and it ended with a freezing realization. Charles is no longer the rebel Prince of Wales fighting for his mistreated lover. He is the king. And as the monarch facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, his primary overriding duty is the survival of the crown. Charles knows with forensic clarity that William and Catherine are the absolute bedrock of the modern monarchy. They hold the public's affection, they generate the positive global press, and they represent the unbroken legitimate bloodline. To attack William over a commercial lease for Tom Parker Bowles would be an act of institutional suicide. To publicly or privately dismantle his son's invocation of sovereign financial protection would signal a divided, chaotic monarchy at a time when the world is watching for weakness. Charles chose the survival of the institution over the financial ambition of his wife's family. In that singular moment of silence, Camilla learned the hardest lesson of her royal life. The king will no longer save her from the Prince of Wales. To understand why this administrative lockout is so permanently catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering reality hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen riding in gilded carriages, draped in historic diamonds and waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But behind closed doors, the forensic financial architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Her secret maneuvering in the weeks prior was never just about vanity. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent financial foothold before her ultimate protector was gone. She knew that without King Charles, she would instantly become a guest in a house owned by a man who has spent his entire life quietly mourning the mother she replaced. By executing the June 13th decree, Prince William did not just block a few memos or cancel a business meeting for Tom Parker Bowles. He cleanly, legally, and permanently severed Camilla's only lifeline to the royal treasury and future commercial power. He reminded her that the Duchy of Cornwall, the billion-dollar real estate empire that funds the monarchy's private endeavours, belongs exclusively to him. He is the landlord. Even King Charles's beloved private residence, Highgrove House, where he and Camilla cultivated their decades-long affair, is legally owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. King Charles literally has to pay rent to Prince William to live in his own favourite home. The realization that she is now entirely at the mercy of her stepsons. Administrative goodwill is a psychological prison of her own making. The illusion of absolute power was instantly replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of financial dependency. As Camilla's shadow empire was quietly dismantled, the physical space within the palace began to immediately reflect the new order. What viewers and royal analysts have noticed in the days following this internal crisis is a profound, subtle shift in how protocol is being weaponized. The consequences of the June 13th decree extend far beyond commercial leases. There has been a noticeable change in access. Reports suggest that security clearances for Camilla's extended family and private staff, once freely dictated by her own office, are now strictly regulated. The privilege of utilizing sovereign properties for private Parker Bowles, gatherings, or accessing the royal fleet of vehicles has been quietly revoked, routed through a grueling approval process managed entirely by William and Catherine's administrative teams. This is how the royal family wages war. It is not fought with shouting matches in the drawing room or messy tabloid leaks. It is fought with locked doors, revoked security clearances, and polite administrative rejections that gently but firmly push the target toward the exit. Camilla is no longer permitted to blur the lines between her bloodline and the Windsors. The boundary has been drawn in permanent ink. Amidst this silent institutional reckoning, the presence of the Princess of Wales has become the ultimate undeniable contrast. Catherine did not need to scream, and she did not need to issue petty demands. She simply allowed the massive quiet weight of the institution to protect her. While Camilla scrambled in commercial desperation, Catherine emerged as a portrait of freezing aristocratic restraint. In a deeply symbolic move observed shortly after the decree was finalized, Catherine attended a private diplomatic reception wearing a specific diamond and pearl heirloom, an iconic piece long associated with Princess Diana. It had historically been kept out of sight during Charles's early reign to avoid offending Camilla. Its sudden reappearance was not a petty aesthetic choice. In the highest echelons of the British royal family jewellery, portraiture and access are the forensic evidence of shifting power. By wearing that specific heirloom, Catherine was actively executing the institutional restoration of Diana's legacy while signalling the permanent boundary placed upon Camilla. Catherine demonstrated that uncomplaining sacrifice, fierce protection of the bloodline, and steadfast loyalty to the crown will always outmaneuver unchecked ambition. She does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because her husband has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. This brings us to the deeper, tragic meaning of this entire crisis. Camilla spent 30 years carefully clawing her way to the very top of the British social hierarchy. She endured intense public hatred, she orchestrated a masterful public relations rehabilitation, and she successfully convinced Charles to place the highest crown in the land upon her head. She believed that reaching the summit meant she would finally be safe, that she could secure her family's future and erase the spectre of the past once and for all. But what this story undeniably proves is that the crown on Camilla's head is entirely hollow. She is surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable power. Yet she is paralyzed by the commercial reality that she is merely a temporary tenant in William's empire. She played a 30-year game of chess, sacrificing everything for the ultimate title, only to realize too late that the Prince and Princess of Wales own the board. Camilla is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, sitting next to a king who will no longer defend her. Walled off from the royal billions and forced to live under the absolute unyielding authority of the next generation. The era of the Shadow Queen attempting to rewrite the monarchy is effectively over. If you want to continue unpacking the silent warfare, the hidden administrative maneuvers, and the psychological power dynamics of the modern British monarchy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the illusions of power, one subtle detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next analysis.